week, we spoke about nurturing trees. Come, find out information, and you will wish you had known this a long time ago. I actually saw something trending that I was like, wow. It was talking about buying AI, an artificial intelligence babysitter for your dog. It was just incredible, the conversation. Obviously, for some people, it's focusing on how much money people will now spend for animal care. And for some people, it was how much people love their animals, replacing this nurturance of children with nurturing their cat or their dog. What my brain was wondering wasn't either of those things. What my brain was wondering was, if this becomes acceptable, if this is actually viewed as a wonderful way to nurture your animal friend, animal child, how long is it going to take before, and probably right now someone's working on it, how long before something is being produced for busy parents with a hefty price tag? And whatever that AI is going to be, whatever that artificial intelligence is going to be, for sure, it's going to claim, as does this dog version of the story, that, oh, this is going to give your children better care, more nurturance, more stimulation than you can. So if you really love your child, buy a device to take care of them. And there's no such thing. There's no substitute for parents, not the best AI or anything else. Honestly, nothing. Nothing pulls from us as much. Nothing can be sometimes as draining and challenging as properly nurturing children, especially some of them. It's good to keep in mind a thought of the Lubavitcher Rebbe. Lubavitcher Rebbe says that every child, of course, we know is like a plant, and we need to water the plant, we need to tend the plant, to weed the plant, to give soil to the plant and fertilizer. But some kids seem to need so much more water and weeding and soiling and everything else, potting, so much more. And there says it's true. Some children do need a lot more because those children aren't plants. Those children are trees. So it's a good thing to remember. I need to remind myself. You might be nurturing a tree, and a tree takes a lot more nurturing than a plant. It's also something else I was thinking, just as an overarching thought, is that when the redemption comes, when Mashiach comes, what will we look like? Obviously, it's hard to imagine what it will look like, because when Mashiach comes, we will be ourselves without our weaknesses, without the negatives that sometimes, and for some of us often, that's how we define ourselves. And the same is true for our children. They will be themselves without the darker aspects. So it's really wonderful to look now at them and yourself, and actually everyone in that way, and see them as their Mashiach self, allowing and appreciating their beauty, letting that shine, letting that be what fills your eyes, and remembering the other stuff is not really them and is not their defining characteristic. I want to talk again, as we're saying, about nurturing children, which for many of us means adult children. I'm going to start with the traditional child model and then apply it. Because, of course, often we think of parenting, we think of younger children, but parenting does not stop when you get a bit older and your kids get a bit older. Your parenting still doesn't stop. So how does that apply, and what can we learn about it? What can we discuss with it? So the best way to mentor ourselves and anyone else is by balancing kindness, love, giving with strength, with restraint, with respect, with understanding boundaries. That's the classical Kabbalistic model. The right side is loving, is giving, is nurturing. The left side is judgment, is discrimination, is boundaries, is holding back. And that perfect balance and synergy of the two, that's the foundation of all relationships. So that's the Kabbalistic model for everything. I mean, there's no place that doesn't work. There's no place that we don't ultimately come back to that model of balance and of behaviors. And as we think of it in terms of our children, we can also actually first start by thinking of it in terms of ourselves, because this relates to us personally as well. We need to be love-based. We need to be positive. We need to be warm. We need to be joyous in terms of our own lives, in terms of ourselves, and in terms of relating to all people. We want to be a giving, loving, warm person. We want to feel love. We want to feel we're loved by God. We want to give love to God. We want to feel we're loved by people. We want to give love to people. And at the same time, we need the judgment of boundaries and discipline to give in a healthy way. So it's a good experience for the giver, us, and for the recipient. When we're talking about children, we could wonder that we want to be loving and positive. Let's go back to like younger children. We want to give a wonderful childhood with wonderful memories. And many times a day, we need to say no to our children. And that's very true. And that in no way minimizes the happy childhood, the love, as long as it's done within the context of a healthy, loving, respectful relationship. So that's how we would think of the model in terms of a parent with younger children. Now, for parents with older children, with adult children, we have two levels of thought. One, what if I wasn't that perfect parent and I didn't do all this when my child was a child? And two, do I need to think about parenting with adult children at all? Parenting an adult? My children are adults. They might be older than I was when I had them. I'm parenting my adult children. And the truth is, if you didn't do any of this when your children were young, you should do it even more now. It's even more important. The focus, give the love, give the respect within the parameters of healthy boundaries. And however well you parented when your child was young, yes, we are still parents as our children are adults. Now, obviously, it's a very different focus. We're not focusing on disciplining our adult children, but all the love, all the attention, all the focus, all the belief, that unconditional acceptance, the relationship, being that sounding board, being the person they can call whenever and tell whatever, all this you actually might need to work on harder than when they were young. Both because you might have old patterns that have to change, and because it might be unnatural, both of you. And you might have to work to create all this. And maybe your child thinks that he or she doesn't need you, doesn't need this relationship business. And unlike when your child is living in your house, of course, you could have an older child who is living in your house. But if the child is not, it's easy for us and them to deprioritize this most pivotal relationship. It's not an in-your-face problem because they're not there and they're not bothering you and you're not bothering them. So you could sort of let it dry up and wither instead of actually actively nurturing it, especially if the relationship is currently difficult. Sometimes for many people, the easiest thing is just to not think about it and move on, and you're busy with your life and you're busy with your friends and you're busy with your work and you're busy with your own personal relationships. And it's a piece in your life and it's a small piece that you're not giving much attention to. But really, our job never ends, as we really know deep in our hearts. And there's a general rule in parenting, which is what I think of as the love bank. And what I mean by the love bank is you can always make withdrawals from your account as long as it doesn't bounce. So each time you say, no, you can't have, or maybe into an adult child, it more be like, I can't do this for you. That's a withdrawal. And that's okay. Just as long as we deposit a lot more love messages, so it's sort of, there's enough in the account. It's going to balance out. There's not going to be any crashing, any bouncing. And there are times with adult children as well. With adults that are children, there are times we need to say no to what they want from you. Maybe they need babysitting help that you can't do. Maybe they need a loan that you can't give. Maybe they want to come and crash on you for a protracted vacation that you're not able to handle at that time or for as long as they want. And sometimes it's not saying no to their request, but sometimes another type of withdrawal could be that we need to tell them a message that they don't want to hear. And obviously, if you're giving unasked for advice, you're going to be very cautious. You're going to give something that would feel like a critique. You're going to be very careful. But sometimes it's necessary. Sometimes they desperately need to hear it. And who else is going to say it? And who's going to say it with all the love that you feel for them, if not you? Could be about finances, their relationship with their spouse, their parenting of your grandchildren, their health. But if you need to say something that you know initially is not going to be appreciated, again, you want to think of that love bank, and then you want to package it in the most palatable fashion. And the two things that I think are the best for this is sometimes you have a concept that you want to convey, you give it over a little drop at a time. A little drop, let it slowly sink in, another little drop, another little drop. You're taking this larger idea and you're crumbling it into little pieces. And a drop, and a drop, and a drop. And little by little, that bigger picture is going to sink in. That's one way of conveying something in a way the other person can absorb it. And a lot of times, I think sometimes even better, on the relationship and you and the message, is sharing about yourself in this area or in a related area. We were talking about if you do need to convey something to an adult child that they do not want to hear, but you do want to give it over. And again, the two best techniques I know are, one, the idea of crumbling it into little pieces and drop by drop by drop, giving over an idea, giving over an idea, giving over an idea until it's organically absorbed, because it's so softly drop by drop by drop given. So it just becomes more and more the way the person themselves starts thinking about things. The other technique that I know that works, that I see, is sharing about yourself. And as you share your struggles and your challenges and things you've gone through, you're sharing something that, again, you're not directly saying, oh, this really relates to your situation. But as you're sharing and as you're sharing and as you're sharing, it should be clear enough that they just naturally start applying it to themselves. If either of these approaches work, they're the best ones I know. If it doesn't work and you have to say something more directly and you can't do it either of these ways, it's good to spend a few conversations with very detailed, real praise in the area of weakness that you want to discuss. So then when you're gently conveying the correction, this child, who's still always your child, feels safe and secure enough in that area to be able to stretch and not just take it as just a blow to their general self-vision. Of course, we know children feel safe when there's clear and consistent boundaries. And we build their confidence by giving them lots of choices within those boundaries and empowering them with, as we would say, age-appropriate responsibilities. So just, of course, as that's true with children, and we can think of that with children, that truth never stops. Everyone needs boundaries. Everyone needs responsibilities. With adult children, you want to respect their boundaries. You don't want to walk where they don't want you to go. And you can, and you should, also have boundaries. Boundaries in terms of your personal information, boundaries in terms of how much you want to share, boundaries in terms of your ability to help them and be there for them. Healthy boundaries are good for the specific relationship between you and them. And it's good to model that for them in all of their relationships, that they also understand the idea of boundaries, respect, and, as I'm saying, responsibilities. Just as with children, with younger children, you want to give them, as we said, age appropriate responsibilities. So also for adult children, if the adult child lives at home, this is a very broad and significant piece. But even with a child living somewhere else, there's still a responsibility in the relationship. Responsibility means they are also contributing to the relationship, like asking, if they're not doing it themselves, for them to call you regularly, let's say once a week. That's an appropriate responsibility. Obviously, if they're not up to that, keep calling and nurture the relationship from your end. But that would be a appropriate responsibility to a relationship. Another type of responsibility and boundary is being respectful and sensitive to your feelings and needs. And that's also something to be conveyed. And it's a much healthier and more beneficial relationship when boundaries and responsibilities are in place. So if this adult child, just like a younger child, is being hurtful and disrespectful, it's good to express that calmly, not emotionally, because you don't want to be a facilitator of an unhealthy pattern of how they're relating to you, which is the model of how they will relate to many other significant people in their life as well. The best parenting tool, of course, is always your shining example. And just as when children are young, there's no better parenting tool than being an amazing person yourself. And that's the model of how they strive to be, want to be, and should be. This continues their entire life. And sometimes you can just, as the shining example, talk out loud and say what you want your child to hear. I mean, even I'm just a very silly little example. I get it that you don't feel you have time to cook. I don't want to make a healthy breakfast either. Sometimes I'm rushing to get to work. I don't have time. And then I breathe and remember how much better I feel after I take care of myself, and how if this day is going to be so crazy, I even more need this good start. Or randomly share. Again, I'm using this very small example just for this concept. Randomly share to him or her or to someone else when the child's around. It was a real struggle to get myself to eat breakfast this morning, but I forced myself to do it, and I'm so glad I did. This is a twist on your shining example, because here you are deliberately using yourself as the model to really convey to them what you want them to hear. This might be a debatable point, but I don't believe it's good or healthy in a relationship with your children to share past inappropriate behaviors that you might have done. And I know sometimes people feel, they want to I don't even want to say even the playing field, but maybe just for the honesty of the relationship, or to show how much they relate. They can, I did that too, I remember. I think what happens when you do that is the child, no matter what their age, turns that in their head to, well, if mom did that and she's, amazing, it's okay. I can do it as well. Someday I'll also be amazing. So I will be very, very cautious in sharing something you did in the past that you view as inappropriate and you do not want your child doing. What I think is wonderful to share is that you struggle. I think sharing struggling and overcoming is a wonderful lesson. Sharing the message, it's not simple for me to do the right thing, but I do it and it feels great. But I have to force myself. I have to discipline myself. I have to inspire myself. And this is how I do it. This is how I force myself. This is how I discipline myself. This is how I inspire myself. Being honest that life is struggle, and that making good choices is struggle, and that being a good person is struggle. That I think is great. That's modeling. But sharing things you've done wrong, again, in the head, no matter their age, can twist to become not so bad. And also, again, with a young child and with an adult child, there's a certain space that we have to be firm. We shouldn't be scared to be firm. We should be scared to raise our voice, no matter their age, to be rude, no matter their age, to be too busy for them, no matter their age. All of those things we need to fear. All of those things we can't allow ourselves to do. But firmness, strength, coupled with love, respect, time, attention, that's good. I just want to focus on those two ideas of love and time, which again, apply to every child, no matter the age. Love. Any healthy person loves their child. I don't think the challenge of a parent is loving the child, but I think sometimes our challenge is expressing that in a way that they process that they are loved. And it might sound surprising, but I've spoken with enough adults to know that adult children can also feel unloved by their parents. And usually when a child doesn't feel loved by their parent, it's the parent that has to shift, even though the parent knows how much they love their child. But we have to really think, how do I express this love in a way that my child really feels loved? It's so critical to feel that your parent loves you. So critical. Of course, we love our children, but does my child feel the love? Are they processing the love, or am I holding it back for whatever reason? Am I a stoic Russian? I don't want to express it. I don't think it's healthy for them to express it, or any other reason. Don't want to make myself vulnerable to them, feel it could be used against me. It is a vulnerability to express love. It's really important for a child. There's love and there's time, meaning we can, of course, we do truly love our children, and we can actually really express the love in a way that the child feels the strength of it, the truth of it. The child really knows we love them, but we only do it in very tiny doses because we don't have time. A child needs time. How much time, how much attention does a child need? Every single person in the world is different. Everyone's love bucket is different. But if you feel there's a strain in the relationship, if maybe you're not supplying their needs, and the needs of the child can be different than the needs of all the other people in your world. It's this person's need. Now, obviously, as adults, our children can project to us that they're too busy for us, that they don't have time for us in their lives. And so you have to tailor this concept of time to their reality. But for something that's as essential, something that's food for the psyche, oxygen for the psyche, this is what a mother provides to her children. So usually for food and oxygen, there's time. Maybe not the same as when they were younger, but there is, should, and must be time. And honestly, the more we give this unconditional love, attention, and time, the more it helps them to continue to grow as healthy, happy adults. Healthy, happy adults with good relationships with significant people in their lives because of the model of the good relationship with you that you have carefully nurtured and cultivated and allowed to flower. Now, of course, something else you want to give to all of your children is a relationship to God. You want to help them be their best. And we all need a relationship with God. And even if your child doesn't think he or she needs that relationship with God, and maybe he or she actively disapproves of your relationship with God, it's still part of their wiring. It's part of their accessing their best self. There's a very interesting vignette I think I've shared with you before of a certain man who was at this point in his early 20s. His name was Elliot Lasky. This was in the late 60s. He had actually been raised by Orthodox parents, Holocaust survivors, but he had gone to university, completely left everything. He dropped out of university. He was touring with the Rolling Stones, like totally into that dark culture. He was in a very, very dark space in his own life when he turned to the Lubavitcher Rebbe, and he had a conversation with him. And at one point, Elliot Lasky asked the Rebbe, "What's the difference? A black man, an Indian, a Jew, they all could say, 'Hear, O Israel, God is Lord, God is one. Shema Yisrael, Eloheinu Adonai Echad.'" Every human can attest to belief in God. What's the difference? The Lubavitcher Rebbe said, for a black man, his ultimate is to be the best he can be as a black man. And for an Indian, his ultimate is to be the best he can be as an Indian. And for a Jew, his ultimate is to be fused with God through Torah and the commandments. Which means for every human besides the Jew, they're their best when they're themselves in the best space possible. For a Jew, we are our best when we transcend ourselves, when we're one with God. And at that point of our fusion with God, that's us, beyond ourselves. That's the best space of a Jew. So as a mother, wanting to give our child the best, we need to give our child God. We need to give them their personal pathway to their ultimate self that can transcend the limits of self. So how do you share God with adult children, especially if they didn't have it when they were growing up? How do you convey that? Especially if they're disapproving what you're doing. How do you convey that? So I think there's two basic roads. Obviously, each of the road could have many, many nuances, but just the two basic roads I see are: one, very strongly by your example, meaning by them seeing you are a happier person, a better person, a kinder person, a more centered person, a more sensitive person, a more caring person. By them seeing how you have improved so much as a person, as you've grown in your relationship to God, that's the best advertisement for God. That's the best unspoken advertisement for God, is for them to see you and your change. And nobody knows you as well as your kid. You and your change. And the more you have God in your life, the more you have peace in your life, and the more you have contentment in your life, and the more you have joy in your life, and the more you have confidence in your life. When they see all of this, that's a very strong, loud, quiet connection, pull between them and God. The other road, and of course, you're not doing one and not the other, is to share. Share your inspiration. Share something you do that makes you feel good. Share something you learned that lifted your spirits and gave you joy or calm or confidence. You can share, not instructing, sharing very carefully. Because when it's instruction, the person's like, I don't want to be instructed. But when it's sharing, you're just sharing like you share all good things that make you happy or significant to you with your children. You're sharing. And when you're sharing truth, and truth that's coming from your heart, it will penetrate the person you're sharing with. So you have these like drops of godliness that you're watering on soil that's very well tilled with your love for your child. So because it's so well tilled with that love, it's so natural for this water to help make things flower. Now, of course, you might be human. I definitely am. And you might occasionally lose it. I definitely do. And you might say something inappropriate. You might blurt out the wrong comment. You might have, I really messed it up that time. So if it's rare, if it's not regular, I think the best thing to do is apologize. And that's a good model. It's good to model that we make mistakes and we apologize and we try to correct it and move on. Now, obviously, if you apologize and then keep doing the same thing, that's not the model you want them to have. So don't do that. But if you're sincerely apologizing and it's rare, that's good. That's a great model for them. At the same time, I think we always have to know and remember and trust that tomorrow will be better. And then we have to work hard to make it better. Very often, I think we all find that our children expose us to all of our own weaknesses, like weaknesses we never knew we had, weaknesses we thought we got rid of a long time ago, weaknesses we're completely unaware of. This is God's deliberate design. Through their needs, through their flaws, I'm forced to perfect my own. So when you're looking at your child or children and they're really pulling at you and their limits are really straining yours, it's not an accident. It's very, very deliberate design. It's very, 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 very much the deepest push for us to grow, for us to become what they need us to be. And of course, definitely the world our children encounter probably is very different from our own values, maybe from the values that we wanted to convey to them. And that's why it's really important that the values of our home, the values we are trying to convey, should be very clear, should be very strong, built on a foundation of love and joy and fun and happiness. And children, as they grow and reach certain ages, they might temporarily leave our values. And they actually might never have exactly our values. They might never be exactly like us. But people go back to their roots. If the roots are strong and positive and healthy, people go back to their roots. And that's why it's very important that we give very clear messages, which of course continues throughout their life. We have to express very, very clearly right and wrong. A lot of things in life are sort of like gray and murky. An example, which isn't relevant in parenting adult children, I'm just giving it for the example of the value conveyed. Let's say a person would say, I'd rather let you do something that I disapprove of, but I'm letting you do it because I want to know exactly what you're doing. And if I don't let you do it, you're going to go behind my back, and then I won't know what you're doing. And that's scarier to me. So that's a certain perspective a parent could have. And there's a certain validity to that approach. But what happens, and I just made that very vague and generic because there's so many different situations like that when you're parenting a child. Let's say when the child's a teenager, there's a lot of such situations in life. But what happens then is the lines of right and wrong become very blurred. And the problem with those lines being blurred is that when they're ready to come back home, at whatever age that is, that they saw enough and had enough and did enough, and they're coming back to those great roots, you want them to know what their foundational values are. And when those lines are blurred, it's not always clear what those values are. That's something really important for us as parents at any age and stage of our relationship with our children, that our values are very clearly expressed, very unequivocal, very, very, very known. Because at a certain point, they'll want them, and you want to make sure they know what they are. We're told, the fifth Lubavitcher Rebbe said, this could be your takeaway. We're supposed to spend 30 minutes every day just thinking about our parenting of our children. I guess we could extend that to our grandchildren. 30 minutes a day. You say, wow, that's a lot of time. I mean, every single day, what do I have to think about already? It never ends. Thinking about what's going on in their life, how you could help what's going on in their life, what message you as a parent want to give them to help them to develop themselves, how I can super saturate them in a way that they will accept it. There's a lot of thought every single day about our children and how we can help them be the best person they can be for their entire life, forever, continuing generations. So yes, that's the most basic, strong, foundational message is we are the mothers. We are the most significant people in the lives of our children at whatever age and stage they are. And we want to do beyond our best, which, as the fifth Lubavitcher Rebbe is saying, takes a lot of headspace and heart space to give them what they need, when they need it, in a fashion that they can hear it and absorb it, and that will always be a very, very significant piece in their life and the life of their children. So some of my thoughts on this, does someone have something they'd like to share from the wisdom they've gleaned over their years of parenting their children?
I love the class. Sorry, I was late to the class. I missed the first part. But I just want to say, I wish I knew that long time ago when I was raising my kids. But it's hard when your grandchildren now live far away, you don't see them frequently. It's hard to apply these principles. I will try to pass it to my kids, but it's amazing. Yeah, just wish I knew it before.
And then when we say that, we say, like everything else in our life, we go back to that same point. God, you run the world. And you could have told me this when I was 25, and you chose to tell it to me a few years later. And that's also part of your plan. And I think we have to accept that. And we have to say, you know what? The mistakes we made are also part of God's plan. And I think every one of us here, one way or another, could echo this point that Menucha sang, myself definitely included. And it's just like, you know what, God, I'm not completely passing the buck, but I'm going to give you ownership for your world. And if I had the information and chose to ignore it, that's a different story, maybe. But not having the information, God, That was your choice. That was a choice you made, and you made it for a reason. And that's part of the journey of each one of us, and that's a part of the journey of all of our children. But I do feel that we still have lots of unfinished business and work that we're still doing. I don't feel it ends, even though it's harder to put this into place at this point than 30 years ago. But that's also part of God's vision, that we're still the parents, and we're still working, and we're still going to do it. Each one of us, however we can, and however we can convey that. And as you're saying, perhaps convey that to our children for them to convey to their children. I'm going to end with a blessing for each one of us, because like Menucha said, I'm sure it's so easy to think about these things and then start like bashing ourselves for the past or the present or both. And the blessing should be that we should both know the truth. The truth is, we have what our children need. God doesn't make mistakes. What your child needs, you have. The blessing is we should know and trust that we have what this child needs, no matter the age, no matter the history of him, of me, or between the two of us. We have what our children need, and we should know that and have confidence and trust in that. The blessing that we should pull out of ourselves what we have, and with wisdom far greater than our own, we should be able to truly parent our child, no matter their age and stage. We should always be able to be there and be that parent. And the blessing that we should see a flowering far beyond what our efforts should have created. There's a saying of the sages in the Hebrew, it's in the Talmud, Yagata, you worked hard, you expended a lot of effort, umatzata, and you found. And that's like a weird expression if you think about it. It's not you expended effort and you found. You expended effort and you accomplished. You expended effort and you created. What do you mean you expended effort and you found? Matzata. I don't know if any of you know the Yiddish word mitzia. A mitzia is a Yiddish expression which means like a find, a bargain. What a mitzia. So what are the sages saying? You expended effort and you found. Well, that's the point. We expend effort. The outcome of the effort is the mitzia. It's the find. It's completely beyond anything our efforts should have created. So that's the third part of the blessing. We're all workers, and we should have the second half of that phrase, the matzata. We should all have the mitzia. We should all find. All of our efforts to produce something so not commensurate, so beyond what our efforts should be able to produce, we should feel it's not me, it's a find. Hope we should all see all that and reflect. And every one of us, me for sure, just try to improve a little bit, be a little bit better. Wow, was a worthwhile class.